Well, I think if we look at the history of media, that we often discover that uses precede the development of technologies, that a technology that doesn't have a clearly understood use, a pattern of cultural practice around it, doesn't take root. We also see that early adapters and adopters, people who are the first to experiment with things, who do them when they're difficult, are sort of help us look toward or anticipate uses that may occur when in fact it becomes easier for everyday people to do it. So I would argue that fan cultures, for example, precede the web in terms of being virtual communities, groups of people who share common interests that are connected over geographic distances, that form a social network, that form forms of participatory culture where they create and share media with each other. That describes the way the fan culture has operated for more than 100 years. Then we can go back to the beginning of the 19th century in the American context, and we discover that people were using toy printing presses to create zines and trade them across the country, that the Amateur Press Association precedes the blogger by more than 100 years. That we see that they were, and those same groups embraced every new technology as it emerged. So the same Amateur Press Association gravitated toward radio in the early 20th century, when radio was seen as a technology that allowed people to share media with each other. They gravitated toward early amateur filmmaking. They were among those involved in the camcorder revolution. And if we look at the early history of the web, we'll see science fiction fans among those who were the first to embrace this technology. So that's just one example of any number of grassroots communities, each with their own history, that were using media, creating media, sharing media, and connecting to each other over geographic distances before we had the web. So as the web comes in, those are the first communities to embrace the technology. Those are the ones who innovate and push it forward, and those are often the ones who spread the technology to other segments of the population. So in some way, the web took the logic of these fan communities or grassroots communities as its own, and the modern web is as much a product of participatory culture as it is of any specific digital technology. Well, I think that's always a back and forth between the industry and the consumer in terms of who shapes the content of culture. So we can't declare mass media dead. I think it will continue to function. I think media industries play a really central role in shaping what culture is available to us. But I think we're also seeing those industries are finding new interfaces with their fans, whether physical interfaces like, say, San Diego Comic-Con, where Hollywood faces 160,000 fans this week and is able to participate in some conversations there, or Web 2.0, which has, for better or for worse, created a space where collective feelings of the fans are registered and weighed in by decision makers within the industry. I don't want to say the industry represents the fans, it doesn't, that there's many ways in which it still pursues its own interest, but I think what we're seeing is fan voices are being heard more loudly, and fans are playing a much more active role in shaping the cultural agenda than ever before. I think we're going to see in the future fans may play an even more active role from the conception of projects forwards, and one of the trends we were talking about in my new book, Spreadable Media, is the role of companies like Kickstarter in the United States, which is a platform that allows independent artists to propose new projects they want to develop and seek microfunding from individual fans or networks of fans from the beginning of the project forward. That means fans may be much more actively connected to media producers, that fans may give those producers a network to draw on rather than going through traditional distributors and other kinds of gatekeepers, and it means that that connection will shape to some degree the kinds of content that's being produced. I don't see that as displacing mass media. I think mass media content continues to be what mass media industries produce, but I think it will strengthen the ability to produce diversity on the level of niche media content, whether it's specific cultural communities or ethnic groups, racial groups, sexual minorities, political minorities. Their interest can be better represented in a system where the producer and the audience are connected to each other from conception forward.